Raise your hand if you've heard of this hashtag. What about this one? Okay, I'd like you to keep your hand raised if you've also heard of hands off, pants on. Okay, thank you very much. What if I told you that there are millions of people who put themselves at risk every day they go to work? And they are absolutely powerless to do anything about it because they need that job to earn a living, to support and feed their families, to put a roof over their heads. Before I tell you about this movement, I'm going to share my own story of living in fear and feeling powerless. I was born in Kuwait along with 4 of my siblings. And in the summer of 1990, my parents went traveling to America. And they happened to have my little baby brother there. Fast forward a few weeks, they come back to Kuwait, and Saddam Hussein invades the country for its oil. And it's a few weeks after that that our lives changed forever. It was September 20th, 1990. And I remember that day like it was yesterday. I'm 8 years old, and I am sitting on the floor of a bomb shelter next to my mom, my dad, and my brothers and sisters. There are bombs dropping all around us. The ground is shaking. Everywhere I turn, I see people crying or praying. I look at my parents, and I have never seen them so scared in my life. And at one point, I wonder if I'm going to live to see my 9th birthday. All of a sudden, 2 men burst into the shelter, and they yell out my little brother's name. It turned out they had been sent by the US Embassy to go and extract all American citizens out of the country for their safety. And because he had just been born in the US, they came to get him, and us as well. They told us we had 1 hour to pack 2 bags among the 8 of us, and they put us on a plane and brought us to Philadelphia. Now, if you've ever moved, you know how tough, how scary it is to leave everything behind. Amplify that by not knowing the language or the culture. We went from being upper middle class to living on welfare for a few months. My father was a mechanical engineer, and he was stripped of his degree. And after 9 long months, he swallowed his pride, borrowed money, and purchased this 7-Eleven franchise, which became a family business. Fast forward a few more years, I'm now 15, applying for college. Every application asks for a social security number. It turns out I didn't have one, and neither did any of my siblings. We learned that we were considered undocumented. That even though the US Embassy intentionally extracted us out of that bomb shelter in Kuwait and brought us over to the States, we could be deported at any moment. We didn't have the proper documentation to stay. Without this, we couldn't drive, we couldn't get a job, we couldn't go to college, couldn't get a loan. I graduated from high school, and at this time, I'm trying to figure out, what am I going to do with my life? After I turned 18, my dad sold the family business. And it was a few months after that, that one day, abruptly, he packed 2 bags, hopped on a plane, and left the country, taking all the family savings with him, leaving us penniless. My mom, siblings, and I banded together, and we did the only thing we could do. We went looking for jobs, under-the-table jobs where we can get paid cash and where it was easy to go unnoticed. We worked in restaurants, gas stations, delis, cleaning homes, anyone that would give us work. And at $5 an hour, which is the average of what we made, we had to have a day job and a night job to make ends meet. A lot happened during this time. I remember being on call, having to come in at a moment's notice, being talked down to. The harassment at work for me would always start in the form of inappropriate sexual comments and jokes, and they would escalate. I remember one male manager refusing to give me 2 weeks' pay unless I gave him a kiss. And it became known that if you had relations with your manager, you got preferential treatment, like the shifts that you wanted. And if you didn't, you slowly got taken off the schedule. So for me, either I was no longer on the schedule, or I would quit when I would be inappropriately touched. And I would go looking for another job, and it got tougher as time went on. The restaurant industry is so small, they all talk to each other. But at every place that I went, I kept finding the same imbalance of power and the same behavior. And so the cycle would repeat. And when 9/11 happened, the day after I went into my day job, my manager turned to me and said, "Yasmine, you don't know how to fly planes, do you?" And I was fired. From then on, I have had the passion to work for the underserved. And it's what's led me to become a social entrepreneur. And I feel I found my true calling with what we're currently doing at Roar for Good, a social impact company with the mission of leveraging technology and education to provide peace of mind and empathy. So hands off, pants on. The Me Too movement ignited talk about workplace sexual harassment. Hands off, pants on is specific to housekeepers in the hospitality industry. Almost 60% of housekeepers have experienced sexual harassment. Almost 60%. Many of them are women of color and immigrants. They're paid by the hour. English is their second language. At work, they're cornered in their room by the guests, by the male guests. They're grabbed or touched, even solicited for sex acts. Guests open the door completely naked, expose themselves, even masturbate in front of them. The socioeconomic contrast of the male guests who can afford to stay at these hotels and the women who clean them, unfortunately, makes this type of harassment common. Many are afraid of reporting the incident. Some of them don't even understand the process. And for those that pursue action, it becomes a case of he said, she said. And unfortunately, the odds do not fall in their favor. But it's getting better. Propelled in part by the Me Too movement, Hands Off, Pants On gained momentum, and it's the actual name of an ordinance that was passed in Chicago in 2017. It provides housekeepers with safety and security measures to help protect them at work. For example, hotels are now required to outfit their staff with panic buttons that immediately route to security once pressed. They must comply and enforce written sexual harassment policies. Signs advertising the laws must be displayed in every room. And for those, in some cases, for those that are offenders of the law, they cannot return to the hotel. These were measures that were not in place before. And there are now 8 cities with similar laws, and more are expected to follow suit. This is an example of how the Me Too movement has touched one industry. And the question that it leads to is, what's the relationship with passing legislation and impacting change? It's no surprise that the system has been dominated by males in all aspects, as judges, lawmakers, prosecutors, administrators in every level. Every group has historically lacked power in this arena. The representation matters a great deal in this case. The Me Too movement was led by Tarana Burke, an African-American woman. The lobbying for protections for housekeepers has been happening for years in the background, and that was also led primarily by women of color. If you were to guess the gender of the person that passed that ordinance in Chicago, what would you guess? It was a woman of color. We need more diverse lawmakers. And there is hope. With a record number of women, non-binary individuals, and people of color entering the House and the Senate for the first time, over 100, in fact, the most diverse ever, I am hopeful for the opportunities we have to pass and enforce legal policies that protect the underserved. Because no one should be afraid while trying to earn a wage.